afternoon, listeners. This is David Wright, and I'm your host of the Disruptive Innovators Champions of Digital Business podcast. And today I am lucky enough to be joined by Nimesh Mehta. Nimesh, how are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's a pleasure. Could you take a minute to tell our listeners a little bit about your current role?
Absolutely. I am Nimesh. I'm the CIO at National Life Group. National Life is one of the fastest growing insurance companies in the US, and it's one of the top 10 life insurers here.
Of course, yeah, a household name, of course. So I'll look forward to learning more about that. But to start, we like to ask, what's one piece of actionable advice you will look to give our listeners today?
It's interesting on the things that you learn through the course of your life. And I think the one piece of advice I'd give to your listeners is stop being comfortable. Learn to lean into your discomfort, because that's the way to grow and learn and to get to where you want to go. I think once you start being comfortable, we get to complacent, I would say. So one piece of advice, don't be comfortable. And if your dreams are big enough, they should scare you.
I hear that as an entrepreneur. And that's great advice. I mean, I've learned and grown the most in my life leading out of uncomfortable events, so great takeaway. So Nimesh, let's learn a little bit more about you. Where did you start out, and how did you get to be the CIO of this national brand?
Life takes you down journeys and curves of all kinds of places. And if I go back in my career, I never thought I would be in the financial services industry. I'm a computer engineer and a robotics person by trade, by design, by education. And I thought my life would be hardware engineering. And I've done that for a while. And I moved into the financial services industry, and I worked for Lincoln Financial for about 14 years. And then I came to National Life because I really wanted to see the impact and see something grow and be a part of that growth. So I joined this smaller life insurance company called National Life. And I joke around with my boss, and I told the board the other day, I said, I'm not sure I was made an offer I couldn't refuse or one I couldn't understand, but I'm still here. So I started down my company. I started in technology as the chief technology officer. A few months later, my boss came to me and said, hey, by the way, how would you like to run this mail print department and transform it? I didn't know anything, never seen a print machine in my life. And I learned a lot about the mail rooms. I went from technology to learning the mail room. And then I came back and I said, hey, what's there? What's next? And he says, we need to think about Vision 2020. So I became the chief strategy officer and worked on our Vision 2020. And then I happened to actually say, it's time for me to really round out my skills. And I left the company for a few months. And I was called back by the CEO, and he said, this thing you wanted to do, would you come back to National Life and do it? I said, doing what? He said, how would you like to come and run all of life and annuity operations? I've never run operations before. Great piece. I jumped in, didn't know what I was doing. Great advice, and took my own advice and did it. And then after that, he said, well, I think we need to really become a technology, digitally enabled company. So I'd like you to take on the CIO role. So here you go, full circle. It's been a real privilege to have learned so many things across so many different parts of the company. And it gives me a different perspective in technology today.
Yeah, very cool. That identify with kind of flying over my skis a little bit, while not over promising and under delivering. It's an interesting place to be. It's kind of leaning into that discomfort, really. But as an organization, that's largely how we grew, because we were building consulting modules as we were, running them in a number of different instances. But that problem solving and that desire to continue learning is really cool.
It is pretty amazing. I remember doing an interview very much out of college for a big consulting company. I remember the lady asking me, What did you learn in college? And I looked at her and I said, nothing. And she thought I had horns in my head, and I wasn't trying to be cocky. And I said, you know what I really learned? Because I would fail every thermodynamics or calculus test if you gave it to me today. But what I
Right.
really learned is how to learn. And I learned how to problem solve. I could take something, break it down into manageable pieces, and figure out what to do with it.
That's yeah, totally. Well, that's a great transition into my next question, Nimesh. What's one of the most important things that you've learned over the course of your life, really? And what was life like before learning it and after learning it?
Yeah, one of the things as I think through it, going way back in time, is for me, it was really accepting who I was and accepting me being an introvert. And I used to always believe that the world was designed to be successful around extroverts. And I needed to become one. And I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. And that was a learning for me to say, how is that going to happen? In fact, a couple of years ago, my high school's going son decided to do a EEG experiment where he puts these things on, people's heads, and he measured brainwave activities during an interview process. And our world is designed, and introverts, when they're interviewing extroverts, appreciate extroverts, and extroverts appreciate extroverts. So you end up being in a situation where, how are you going to win? And I think what I
Mm,
learned over time is I need to accept that as it is a superpower and not a kryptonite. And when I looked in and looked at so many different leaders, Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Abraham Lincoln, Einstein, they were all introverts and they were very successful in what they did. And after I could, figure that out and I became more self-aware, I think the learning journey and what it gave me in life was empathy, is really meeting people where they are versus expecting them to come to you. And I think that is something that comes, with this personality type. The other thing that it really, really taught me, and I put it to good use, is diversity of thought. Is different personality types bring different diversity of thought. And diversity of thought allows you to make better business decisions. And if everybody thinks alike, you've got an echo chamber. And I think that's what I learned in my life, is accept that and figure out what you're going to do with it. And it is a superpower and not your kryptonite.
it's hugely insightful. Um, and it resonates with me because I struggled with imposter syndrome, and I wouldn't necessarily classify myself as an introvert, but I, for a long time, would certainly seek validation, to a, I don't want to say unhealthy degree, but really almost determine my worth by what people thought of me, or what uh, if something went well, then I was good. And if something went poorly, then I was bad. Right. And it's just, I had to realize that, I'm enough. I have valuable insights to offer. I'm a father. I have, a beautiful life, and, you know, I have, I'm a thought leader. And if that resonates with someone, great. And if not, that's okay too. Right. And I also love what you said about the the different members of the team. I had a conversation the other day about how you have to lead those people differently as well. So the diversity of thought, I think welcoming that is huge. And as a leader, you know all these people have different personality types. How am I building that human connection with them and encouraging them, meeting them where they're at, the way they need to be led, I think is also kind of interesting.
Absolutely. Because every person is different and every person requires a different level of coaching. You don't coach every athlete the same way.
Exactly. How about one of obviously we've all had failures over the course of our career. What's something that stands out in your mind as maybe a project that didn't go well, or personally, professionally, or otherwise, something that you failed at that you learned a lot from?
Failure is something that's sort of become a buzzword in a way, and everybody's talking about it. And I think my biggest failure was hating failure.
Mm,
I hated to fail. I would do anything not to fail. And sometimes learning when to fail, how to fail is more important than failing and learning from that failure and then applying it and turning it into performance. So, how do you take something that you failed at, learn from it, apply it, and turn it into performance? So, I think for me, it was really first accepting the fact that failing is okay. That was my biggest failure because I would not fail. And I don't know how much damage I probably caused around me because I probably left dead bodies in my path as I plowed through not wanting to fail.
mm.
I think that was my biggest learning lesson out of it is just accept failure. It's okay.
That's a
Celebrate
great one.
failure.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge part now too of even of innovation. I talk about this with clients all the time, how, in order to to innovate, we are going to need to fail at certain junctures during the course of this journey quickly, and welcome that, integrate that feedback into what we're doing and keep moving and not make anyone wrong. Not, it doesn't need to be a whole thing. So I love that. That's great advice.
It's not if, it's when you fail and what are you going to do with it. And with entrepreneurs, executives, leaders, anybody in whatever you're working on, it's figuring out what you're going to do with it. That's the most important part of it.
100%. So, Nimesh, let's talk a little bit more about your current role. So, you're the CIO of National Life. What is your vision for the organization, and how does that translate into your world in IT and digital?
Absolutely. Let's start with the organization itself. For people that don't know, National Life is being a life insurance company. One of the biggest things that we are a very purpose and mission driven organization. People talk about that, and our mission is really to serve middle America. It is the most underserved part of our nation and community. We look at it and we say there's more than out of the 300 million population, there's more than 100 million middle Americans that are either underinsured or just not insured. We've seen so many bad things happen when people haven't thought through their future. And sometimes you either live too long, you die too young, or you get ill. One of those three things is going to happen to you, and you got to figure out what you're going to do with it. So our company's mission is to keep those promises and to make sure that we're doing good in the process. And we say when doing good is let's do the right thing first, and then other things will follow. So, that's the values and the mission of the organization. And as you think through that, you kind of contemplate and say, what does this have to do with technology, right? Okay. But I think when you think about technology is also all about helping the company keep those promises. And if you go to the old adage that people have said, if Ford asked his customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. But with technologists, and we have to understand and learn the business to be able to read between the lines and understand faster horses actually means speed and transport. And how are you going to deliver that? So our strategy within IT has been pretty unchanged for many years since I've taken on the role. We do different things, but strategically, to become a technology-enabled company, we believe in three pillars. And as techies, we believe in tech, TEC. It's a pretty simple acronym, right? And T stands for talent. What are we going to do to get the right talent? Because without people, and people are our secret sauce. If we don't have the right people, nothing's going to happen. So let's get that talent piece done. What are we doing towards that? E, the second piece, which is execution. We are in the pursuit of flawless execution. And that's the nirvana state, but it is all about learning. And every step we take a step forward. As we fail, we learn, and we, go through that. But again, that's the execution. And the C is customer understanding. And that's, goes back into what I was telling you earlier, which is how do we understand what our customers are looking for, not what they're asking for? And to put that together and develop something that is the art of the possible, to be able to deliver that competitive advantage for the organization. So that's kind of how we think about technology here at National Life. It's not just an enabler. A lot of people talk about enabling technologies. I think technology is part and parcel of business. It drives the business forward. It's not the second class citizen or the second fiddle or second. It's a part of the table. People tell me, do you have a seat at the table? I always hear that question from a lot of people. I said, it's not about having the seat at the table. My problem is, what am I going to do with my seat at the table?
Yeah, 100%. It sounds like you guys are structured really well as an organization. It's great to see. It's great to see that. What are some of the key initiatives you guys are focused on?
We're doing so many things, and some of these things, as you said, in an insurance company, we're like an aircraft carrier, right? If you turn it 3 degrees off course, you'll end up 5 miles away from your destination. So it's really about trying to manipulate all the different ecosystems, and some of the systems we have are older than me. So you've got to be able to live and coexist in the world of innovation, transformation, legacy modernization, and just some old stuff that's never going to go away. So that's our world. So let me talk about some of the things we're doing innovatively. When you think about the values in serving Middle America are working people. When you used to buy life insurance in the past, well, somebody came to your house or you went somewhere and you had to give blood, they all had to get tested, so on and so forth. And then you waited, for 1 billion days, and it went into a black box, and somehow magically a policy showed up at your doorstep. And that was the life insurance experience. And you didn't know, or you changed your mind in those 60 days and said, yeah, I don't need it anymore. And you moved on. Maybe you really needed it. So what we're trying to do is to really simplify the whole experience of life insurance and to make it faster. And we just implemented this, just went live about, I think, a couple of months ago, where now we've developed this platform that allows a person to apply for a life insurance policy through an agent, go through that whole process electronically. The whole thing gets underwritten electronically. It gets issued electronically, delivered electronically, all instantly with no human touch.
Wow.
That gives you scale.
Yeah. How do they manage medical underwriting?
Data. It's the magic. There's data out there. And when you look around, there's medical information, financial information, all kinds of other things that we can put together in our own secret algorithm and figure out what risk, the customer has, and therefore what premium they should be paying for that particular policy. So you don't need the information that you needed once upon a time, because there's this whole thing, everybody talks about it, and in God I trust, and everything else, there's data.
Yeah, that is innovative, and that's really impressive. I have to check out your platform now. I have some life insurance, by the way, everyone, but could always use a little more, probably, especially with another baby on the way, right?
Yeah, since you have another baby on the way, I'll be calling you if you don't have any.
There you go. Great points. And I think relevant to a lot of our listeners, for sure. How about some of the best practices you and your team follow? I imagine you might have some good insights there.
Yeah. When you bring people of different thought processes together, you need to learn to appreciate those thought processes, because just bringing them together doesn't get you the right decision. And one of the best practices we follow with my team is a concept that we call intellectual wrestling. And what I mean by that is we leave our stripes at the door when we come in, and we're willing to put our point of view forward, and everybody gets heard so that we can make the best decision for the company. And sometimes it's a knockout, drag down, debate, argument about something, and then we can go out and have a drink together. And that's totally fine because it had nothing to do with work. We're still friends. But to have the availability and the safe space to be able to do that is critical. It sounds really simple, but if you try to implement it, it will take years to implement. It took me about 3 to 4 years just to get people comfortable, because you always have that one person that doesn't want to say anything. And as a leader, I would say go last. Once you put your opinion forward, they're going to follow.
Right. Yeah. That's brilliant. I mean, I think it speaks to the culture that you clearly created, because just, I mean, the fact that you said safe space, I mean, is just a testament to that. I mean, I think more leaders need to be really focused on that right now. To create that environment for sharing of ideas, and B, because when you talk about the war for talent, you know, one of the biggest enemies too is attrition, right? Because you know, with attrition, not only are you going to, you know, lose that employee and lose the productivity there, but then you're going to need to invest in hiring and training someone new. I mean, it's like a, you know, $60,000 to $100,000 proposition depending on the employee type. So you know, spending the time to create a culture like that, I mean, I think is important. So that's, you know, definitely a great best practice. You know, we touched on a number of the innovative projects you guys have going on, but any other innovative technologies that you're excited about in the near or long term that you think will serve to support the business vision of National Life?
I think there's a couple of interesting things going on. I think, you know, in the world of security, I think biometrics are going to play a big role. I think if you look 5 to 10 years down, I think quantum computing is going to have a role, because encryption is no longer going to be valid if things break down. So I think there's a lot of things that we're looking at that are sort of out there. But when you think about disruption, I think about disruption as not trying to create the next technology that creates the disruption, but it's really about how can we be innovative to stitch things together that already exist in disruptive ways. So how can I take biometrics and something else and create this unique platform or something that we can do so much better than anybody else?
Yeah. And that also, that makes total sense. I saw, you know, a company another company, a car dealership out of the Midwest, kind of doing something similar with an online auto sale platform with open APIs and with you know, all the open source kind of new cloud-based platforms. It's becoming easier and easier to do that. Granted, when some of your platforms are out of date, you know, that can, you know, pose some issues, and that's not dissimilar to, you know, most or many, I should say, financial institutions that we talk to. But yeah, I think that's a great strategy. So Nimesh, where do you see the financial services industry going in the future, and what do you think will be some of the biggest changes as time passes?
You know, David, I'm going to say something that's probably going to be controversial to your listeners, so I'm going to put it out there. I think digital was yesterday. Everybody's chasing digital, and I think digital is yesterday. I think what we have to be looking for, and whoever cracks this nut is going to be the genius, is humanization. And when I say that, digitization is something that we did in the past, because as we look forward and we look at things differently, what we did is we were trying to build digital relationships using technology. And I think what we have to morph to is using digital to build relationships. Just that slight twist brings the human aspect of what we need to do in computing, especially after COVID. People are craving for human interaction. They don't want to be talking to a machine or another Zoom call. And the best
100%.
example I can give you of that is a GPS, right? A couple of years ago, the GPS lady always said, in the next 100 meters, make a right turn. Well, I don't have a measuring tape and I don't know what 100 meters is. But now if you hear it, it'll go, at the next light, make a right turn. Well, that's how a human gives directions. And that's a perfect example of humanization. And I think digital was probably yesterday, but if we can crack the nut on humanization, I think that'll be the next phase of the future.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing that insight, Nimesh. So, Nimesh, we're coming up on time here, but we like to end the podcast with a question. If you could go back 5 or 10 years in time, what advice would you give your younger self?
As I look back a few years, I have to tell myself that your legacy is your team. You've got to figure out what's the best way to bring out the best potential as a coach in your athletic team to be able to get them to become the best performers they can be. It's not about you. It's not about you moving forward. It's about you really thinking about leaving that legacy of your team when you look behind. I would say that's the best piece of advice I could have given myself. Had I truly believed in that, I probably would have done what I do today 10 years earlier.
Right. That's great advice. But we still see leaders that are, towards the tail end of their career and are still holding on to that ego. You know what I mean? But you can't hit the same stride that you did when you're in your 30s. So being able to, I love that, leaving that legacy by empowering your team and leading your team. That's just such great advice.
You truly have to believe it's a privilege to serve as a leader.
Love that.
And until then, you're a boss.
Right. A manager. Exactly. Nimesh, it was an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I hope we get to talk again.
Yeah, me too. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to the Disruptive Innovators Champions of Digital Business podcast, and we'll catch you next week. Cheers.